My husband died in the sea trying to save his first love. By the time they notified me, the body had almost been eaten by fish. The officer asked if I wanted them to recover it. I waved my hand decisively. I refused to waste public resources. With the certificate the police issued, I went straight to cancel my husband's household registration. After contacting my husband's lawyer, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I opened a bottle of champagne late at night. I was originally only entitled to half the assets, but now I can take 2/3. This called for a celebration. My husband Nathan is dead. He took his first love, Mandy, on a ferry cruise. They hit a wave, the boat struck a reef, and he gave the life-saving chance to Mandy while he drowned in the sea. When the police notified me, his head had been eaten by sharks. The body floated on the surface. At first a few fishermen tried to haul him in, but another shark came, grabbed him and swam off. So they only recovered Nathan's wallet and his phone. As the city's most talked about entrepreneur, everyone wanted to retrieve Nathan's body. The police asked if I wanted a rescue team to search for him. I waved my hand, no need, absolutely not wasting public resources. An hour later I used the certificate the police gave me to cancel his household registration. The clerk saw his ID and even shed 2 tears. Mr. Nathan was a very good man. Madam, please accept my condolences. I laughed out loud. She was right, Nathan was a really good man. He was supposed to go with me in a couple of days to get our divorce certificate and with Mandy to register their marriage. Instead he died, leaving me a large inheritance. With no body, I could only burn some of Nathan's things to stand in for his ashes. So I burned the useless scrap paper from his company office along with his personal belongings. After burning them, I put the ashes into a plastic bag, planning to buy an urn tomorrow. I contacted a lawyer and began to liquidate Nathan's assets. 6 companies, 8 cars, 66 storefronts, 88 apartments, plus gold bars in the bank, and the funds and stocks he held. Just as I was counting roughly how many zeros there were, the lawyer told me, 2 of the properties were already transferred to Miss Mandy while Mr. Nathan was still alive. What? I won't let anyone mess with my lucky numbers. I turned to the lawyer and asked, the things Nathan gave her, I should be able to get them back, right? No wonder he's a lawyer who makes $1 million a year, he saw straight through. That same day the data from Nathan's waterlogged phone was recovered, and that afternoon my lawyer's letter was couriered to Mandy's house. When Mandy arrived, I'd just opened a bottle of champagne. She grabbed a glass and hurled it in my face. Christina, what do you mean by sending that lawyer's letter? I dodged to the side and the liquid in the cup emptied onto the carpet. My Italian handmade rug. I looked at Mandy with a face full of distress. That's counted in there too, you'll pay me for it later. Who gave you the nerve to ask me for these things? Nathan gave them to me. We're getting married soon, so they're mine. Miss Mandy, do you understand the law? I sneered. Gifts Nathan gave you are marital property. I have the right to demand their return. Mandy went pale and pulled out her phone. You didn't discuss any of this with Nathan, did you? I'm calling him right now. Wait and see, he won't let you off. At that I laughed out loud. Don't bother calling, he won't pick up. Nathan's in the shark's belly. Mandy's eyebrows and eyes nearly twisted together. Christina, you're cruel. You two are married, do you really have to curse him like this? I waited for her to finish yelling, then reached into my bag and took out Nathan's ID, cut neatly into 2 pieces. What? You don't believe me? This is his ID, I cut it this morning. Mandy stared at the 2 halves of the ID for a moment, stunned, still disbelieving. You must be up to some trick. I'll call him right now. Don't you think you'll get a single cent? She dialed a few numbers on her phone, and soon the phone in my bag started to ring. I took Nathan's phone out of my bag, the screen flashed the name wife. Mandy's face instantly went deathly pale. Why is his phone with you? I told you he's dead. What about the body? A shark ate it. I spread my hands. Miss Mandy, did you forget the cruise you two went on together? How did you come back by yourself? I thought, Mandy sank to her heels, her whole body trembling, her eyes suddenly reddening as tears fell like pearls. I couldn't help rolling my eyes. My Italian handmade carpet, tears are messy, you know. Mandy cried for a while, then suddenly stood up and ran toward the pillar in the living room. Nathan, I'll die with you. Startled, I instinctively stepped back a few paces, grabbed my phone, and called. Officer, please come quickly, someone's trying to commit suicide in my house. The police arrived soon. After hearing what happened, they took Mandy away. As they were leaving, I didn't forget to remind her. Remember to return my things, or I'll sue. One of the policemen cocked his head and glanced at me, his eyes seeming to say, she's already like that, and you're still provoking her. I shrugged, those were hundreds of thousands, who wouldn't be anxious? The next day I began planning a funeral for Nathan. After all, he had so many wealthy relatives, and in recent years I'd given them my share at weddings and such. Now it was harvest time. I notified a bunch of Nathan's relatives and hired a feng shui master to help pick a burial plot. The spots the master favored I didn't like at all. I preferred the one on the very edge. It was bare, nothing grew there. The master said, no. If he's buried there, your husband's descendants will have a hard life. I clapped my hands, perfect, let's do that, the feng shui's great and it's cheap. After all, Nathan and I had no children, no descendants to worry about. After buying the plot and the urn, I hired a funeral company and put on quite a show for Nathan's funeral. At the service I pretended to cry while eyeing the condolence money. Sure enough, they were all wealthy, the envelopes grew thicker and thicker, so fat I nearly laughed out loud. Toward the end of the funeral, Mandy arrived. She wore all black and was holding the hand of a 7- or 8-year-old boy. She walked straight up to Nathan's photo. The funeral, already hushed, fell even quieter, everyone's eyes and ears sharpened. Zeke. Mandy's voice sounded weak. Kneel. This is your father. Just as the little boy was about to kneel, I ran over and helped him up. Kid, you can't just claim someone's your dad. Mandy panicked. He's mine and Nathan's son. Oh. I lowered my eyelids. You say he is? I don't believe it, who can prove it? We can prove it. 2 more people appeared at the door. It was my mother-in-law and father-in-law, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. Christina, you bitch. The moment she saw me, my mother-in-law lunged straight at me. My son is dead and you told everyone but didn't tell us, what were you plotting? There was no way I would let her hit me. I stepped back, waved my hand, and immediately someone came up to hold her back. I said from the side, Mom, wasn't it you who told me not to contact you unless I was dead? Apparently my mother-in-law had forgotten. That year she kicked me out of the house and said exactly those words to me. You poisonous woman, my son was definitely killed by you. You did such low, despicable things for money, you won't die a good death. The mother-in-law lunged at me, clearly trying to scratch my face. Luckily the bodyguard I hired was strong, he held her tight, not leaving the slightest gap. Mom, you can't not know how Nathan died, right? He was with Zeke, go call Grandpa and Grandma. Mandy cut me off outright, dragging that child over. Grandmother immediately bent down and touched the child's face. So this is our Reginald family's grandson, he looks exactly like Nathan did when he was little. She then looked at Mandy, Mandy, you've really worked hard all these years. You've raised the child on your own. Watching this scene of recognition made me feel a little sick. I kindly warned, Mom, do you believe everything she says? We don't even know who this child belongs to yet. At the sound of that, Mandy snapped, Christina, are you saying this child isn't Nathan's? I'm telling you, this child is mine and Nathan's. When we broke up I was already pregnant, and I've been living with the child all these years. The mother-in-law joined in, this child is clearly from our Xiong family line. You bad woman, you can't have your own children and you're jealous of others who do. Seeing the mother-in-law take her side, Mandy straightened up. She began to cry about how hard it had been raising the child these past few years, how much discrimination a single mother endures. Oh really? I cut her off without mercy. How come I heard you married someone abroad, that you cheated and he left you? You're talking nonsense. Mandy's eyes filled with tears as she turned to the mother-in-law. I can bear it myself, but it's truly pitiful for a child to grow up without a father. My mother-in-law was infected by it too, and started railing at me. Christina, you've never been a mother, you don't understand. I understand, Mandy. I said softly, Mom, even if this child really is Nathan's, there has to be proof. Otherwise anyone could bring a child and claim he's your grandson. Would you accept that? I have proof. Mandy straightened her spine. Back when Nathan didn't believe Zeke was his, he had a paternity test done. That paternity test is still in a drawer in his office. Mom, go look for yourself and you'll see. Oh. Things weren't even heated yet. They've already changed their tune. It wasn't just me, every single person present had taken on a telling expression. This funeral really was lively. Everyone showed up. The mother-in-law, on hearing this, immediately had someone fetch that paternity test from Nathan's office. I intervened again, Mom, let's wait until after the funeral to deal with this. There are so many people here, making a scene wouldn't look good. The mother-in-law snorted coldly, what? Christina, are you afraid that when that paternity test comes back, the child will be able to contest your inheritance? I'll tell you this, one should be magnanimous. If I were in your position, I would certainly acknowledge Zeke. There was no calming her, none at all. After Mandy told them exactly where the paternity test was, someone from Nathan's company went to retrieve it shortly thereafter. I took the opportunity to make a call. In less than half an hour the person returned. The moment Mandy saw him she went up to him, well? Did you get it back? The man looked troubled, no. How could that be? Mandy cried out, did you not look properly? I've turned everything inside out. People at the company said. The man answered as he glanced toward me. Don't be afraid of her. My mother-in-law, sensing something, said, what did the people at the company say? Mrs. said she had already burned those things. Oh, blame me. I stepped forward. It's not that, I was afraid of being reminded, so I burned Nathan's things, but I didn't see any paternity test in there. Mandy's face went dark, and she lunged at me, trying to hit me. Christina, you poisonous woman. You did it on purpose, you don't want my son to return to our family. She looked terrifying, and my bodyguard hurriedly stepped in front of me. Mandy, don't act like a mad dog. Don't say I haven't seen that paternity test, even if I had, how could you prove it's real? You didn't even retrieve Nathan's body, how am I supposed to prove it was really him? Mandy shouted hoarsely. Christina, you're such a petty person, you want to hog Nathan's inheritance. My mother-in-law hadn't known that Nathan died in the sea because I wouldn't let them pull him out, but the moment she started crying, everyone found out. Mother-in-law's face darkened, why didn't you pull my son out? You couldn't even give him a proper burial, so on what grounds do you inherit his estate? I'm his wife. I laughed. Mom, why are you siding with an outsider? She's the mother of my grandson, but that doesn't make her an outsider. You useless bitch who can't have children, you're the real outsider. Give my son's money back. Mom. I stopped my crazed mother-in-law. Do you know why I haven't had children all these years? Isn't it because you've done too many bad things and can't have kids? He really can't father children. I let out a cold laugh. But the one who can't have children isn't me. What do you mean? My mother-in-law froze. It can't be my son, can it? Yes, Nathan is the one who can't father children. I clapped my hands, and someone immediately handed me a file folder. Family shame shouldn't be aired in public. I didn't intend to say anything, but you kept pushing me, so I have no choice but to do Nathan wrong. Inside are his physical exam reports from the past 10 years, he has been infertile since 10 years ago. How could Mandy possibly have a child with him? My mother-in-law opened the folder and the papers fell out. Mandy picked one up, read it over and over, her face draining of color as she kept shaking her head. Impossible, this is fake. There are even hospital stamps on these. If you don't believe it, you can go confirm with the hospital. Mandy reached for her grandmother's hand again, but the grandmother, frowning as she looked at the medical reports, yanked her hand away. I pretended a few tears fell, turned to the relatives and said, "Sorry to have let you gawk. The funeral is over, everyone can leave." When everyone left, their faces were written with the joy of having heard an earth-shattering piece of gossip they couldn't wait to share. I stopped worrying about those three and put on my sunglasses as I left. A few days later, I received a letter from Mandy's lawyer. It stated that regarding Nathan's estate division, Mandy's children should get a share too, and Mandy had filed a lawsuit in court. A few days after that, I received a notice for a pretrial mediation, instructing me to arrive on time. When I got it, I was furious. I called my lawyer straight away and demanded to know why, when my lawsuit against Mandy hadn't even gone to trial, hers was already being mediated. My lawyer explained for a long time, but I didn't really understand much. The gist was that there are two different systems, and it was normal for her side to be handled first. I attended the pretrial mediation without much enthusiasm. Mandy said, "Zeke is Nathan's child." I said, "Nathan can't father children, I have a medical report." "Your report says the sperm motility is low, but that doesn't mean there's no motility, the doctor said conception is possible." Mandy looked pleased, the corners of her eyes smiling. "Next time you should actually read a book." "Oh, and?" I yawned wearily. "Do you have any evidence that this child is Nathan's?" "Of course there is." Mandy slapped a sheet of paper down on the table. "This is the paternity test between Zeke and his grandfather. It proves my son is biologically related to Nathan's father. Nathan's father only had one child, so Zeke is a member of the Seong family." I glanced at the lawyer, who kindly reminded her, "That doesn't count." Mother-in-law slammed the table. "How does it not count?" "Christina, you're so petty. That child is my son's blood, he deserves to inherit my son's money." "So what if he's illegitimate? Men have affairs all the time. Besides, that child isn't only Nathan's, he's yours too. How lucky to have a child." I smiled. "Mom, don't get worked up. The court wants a paternity test." "What does parent and child mean?" "It means a father and his son. Besides, don't you really know? Dad actually has another son." My mother-in-law froze. I took out a paternity test and handed it over. "I didn't intend to say anything, but I never expected you to side with an outsider. I don't want to keep hiding things from my father-in-law either. This is the paternity report Nathan helped him get before, it's for another one of his children." I produced photos and videos. "These are the child's pictures and footage. Right now he and his mother, Evelyn, are living in my father-in-law's South City villa. My father-in-law goes there twice a week. There are a whole crew of nannies and bodyguards, and the chefs are all hired banquet masters. I've eaten there once, TSK, that taste." The more I spoke, the darker my mother-in-law's face became. I didn't forget to placate her. "Mother-in-law, don't be petty. It's normal for a man to have a few people on the side. This child isn't only my father-in-law's, he's yours too. How wonderful to have another child." I returned every word my mother-in-law had said back to her. She completely lost her mind, slammed the table and was about to leave. I couldn't stop laughing. To her retreating back I said, "You're leaving already? The mediation isn't over yet." My mother-in-law left, and Mandy saw she had lost ground. She pinched her own thigh with her hand and tears fell. "Christina, I know Nathan and I did you wrong, and you have every right to resent us. But you've seen it, Zeke looks exactly like Nathan. How could he not be his child? For the sake of all the years you and Nathan were together, please leave something for his child." Her words were unbearably pitiable. Everyone in the room was somewhat moved. I began to understand why Nathan went reckless the moment he saw her. Her face was just made for playing the victim. But she picked the wrong target to play the victim to. I sneered and repeated the same line, "How can you prove that the child is Nathan's?" This mediation actually succeeded because Mandy withdrew the lawsuit. Even if she hadn't, there was nothing she could do, short of going into the sea and pulling Nathan out herself. Even God couldn't prove that the boy was Nathan's. When I got home, I ran a hot bath for myself. After luxuriating in it, I called my eldest aunt, who works as a nanny at Nathan's father's place. On the phone, my aunt gave a vivid account. After Grandma returned, she confronted Grandpa outright, even got into a fight with him, and vowed she'd make that mistress pay. When Grandfather saw the matter exposed, he stopped pretending and told Grandmother he wanted a divorce. He only had that one child now, and he planned to leave all his assets to the mistress's son. Grandmother cried, made a scene, even threatened to hang herself at home. Grandfather simply went straight to Evelyn's place. Grandmother was used to lording it at home. My eldest aunt and the other housekeepers didn't much like her, so when she said those things, my eldest aunt laughed out loud. Finally, my eldest aunt asked me, "So your grandfather cheated, will he be left with nothing?" I told her, "Watch fewer TV dramas, a man who cheats never walks away empty-handed." Even when Nathan divorced me and decided to give me half his assets, that was him having a conscience. I figured my mother-in-law wouldn't divorce my father-in-law. After all, he wouldn't split his fortune with her. But what I didn't expect was that she actually did divorce him. My father-in-law had long since moved his assets, so all she received was a single villa. She was furious and stormed over to his villa in the south of the city, beat up the other woman, and, surprisingly, the other woman called the police. My mother-in-law spent a few days in the station and in the end even lost that villa. Now she's scraping by on Nathan's inheritance, but it's not enough to support the extravagant lifestyle of a wealthy matron. I heard she's been looking for projects lately, planning to invest herself and earn a little nest egg for retirement. Watching the commotion, the trial I brought against Mandy to reclaim my property finally began. There was no suspense to the case, of course I won. Yet even a month after winning, Mandy still hadn't returned my money or the house. She must have lacked the hands to move that much stuff, so, having a kind heart, I went and found a big truck, drove it over, and with a few young guys knocked on the door. Mandy pressed against the door and wouldn't open it. "Christina, you're trespassing." I found a stool and sat down. "Don't go slapping labels on me. The court has already awarded this house to me. If I walk into my own home, how is that illegal trespassing? Come out now, or I'll smash the door. If you dare smash the door, I'll call the police." I said, "Fine, you call them. Let's see whether the police make you leave or make me go." Naturally, Mandy didn't dare call the police. If she did, she would be the one who had to go. Just as we were at an impasse, a black stretch Lincoln pulled up behind us. I looked back. Isn't that my father-in-law's car? Not even a minute later, my father-in-law stepped out of the car. Seeing the scene before him, he frowned and asked, "What's going on?" "Dad, she wants to kick me out." With my father-in-law's arrival, Mandy opened the door. She stood beside him, tears welling in her eyes. "Please do something about this crazy woman." I tilted my head and looked at the two of them. What kind of strange spectacle was this? Why were Mandy and my father-in-law acting so close? My relationship with my father-in-law wasn't exactly close, but it wasn't as bad as with my mother-in-law. Yet after hearing Mandy, he actually turned to me and said, "What's your problem? You don't stay home properly, and every day you come here bullying widows and orphans. What kind of skill is that?" I hadn't said a word. Mandy spoke up, "She wants to snatch my house." I said, "How is that your house? The court has already ruled, you're the one who needs to move out." My father-in-law grew more and more confused as he listened, so Mandy bawled and embellished the story as she told it again. He flew into a rage. "This is my son's house. He can give it to whomever he wants. Who are you to try to take it back?" I used to think only my mother-in-law was unreasonable, but I didn't expect my father-in-law to act even more shameless. Fortunately, I'm not afraid of him at all. I rolled my eyes. "This is the house Nathan and I bought after we got married. It's our marital property. If he gave it to her without my consent, I can take it back, the court already ruled in my favor. What good does your disapproval do? If it still won't work, we'll sue again. My father-in-law was taken aback by my attitude. Mandy looked at him with an aggrieved face. Dad, I don't have any money, and if I give the money and the house back to her, how are Zeke and I supposed to live? My father-in-law thought for a moment, then spread his hands at me. How much? I'll pay her back for her. I was taken aback when I heard that. I took out the transaction records from my bag. Father-in-law leafed through them page by page, and in the end his face turned ashen. Christina, you're crazy poor, you're even counting 1 yuan bottled water in here. I felt wrong too. A fly is still meat, every bit of this money is my hard-earned money. After reading the records, father-in-law tossed them to his secretary, transfer the money to her later. I hurriedly thanked him, thank you, Dad. Nathan's dead. Don't call me Dad. All right, thanks, Uncle. Father-in-law looked at Mandy and said to her, you're moving into my place today. Give this house back to her. Mandy was about to say something, but he shot her a glance and, with domineering finality, added, isn't my place better than yours? Zeke is my grandson. Even if the law doesn't acknowledge it, I do. His name will definitely be in my will. Mandy thought it over and obediently made room for me. She wasn't stupid, after all, father-in-law's wealth was several times Nathan's. I watched her happily load those things into the car and offered a kindly warning, Mandy, there's no such thing as a free lunch. I advise you to think it through before you move. Mandy's mouth curved wildly upward, you're just sour grapes because you can't have it. After all, no matter how rich Nathan is, he's only a second-generation rich kid, how could he compare to his father? Too bad you don't have children. Even if the old man really did something, you wouldn't get a single cent of that inheritance. When Mandy finished packing everything, she generously invited me to inspect the house. I sat on the sofa without moving and suddenly asked her a question. Mandy, you already knew you were pregnant before you went abroad, right? The Nathan family likes you so much, and you two loved each other so much, how did you end up apart? I remember when Mandy first returned to the country, Nathan stayed up that whole night, tossing and turning in bed while staring at his phone, afraid of missing some message. Somehow that sentence must have struck a raw nerve with Mandy. She withdrew her smile, a little flustered. What does that have to do with you? Nathan's dead, why are you asking about this? I laughed. Nothing, just thought you'd come back to beg me. Mandy seemed to think I was joking, she laughed twice. Who's begging whom is not so sure. 6 months later, Mandy did come. She knelt before me, her voice hoarse. Christina, please, save my son, you're the only one who can. She crawled toward me and grabbed the leg of my trousers with her hand. Nathan's father is going to kill him, and he's imprisoned him. I don't know what to do, please help me. I took a sip of tea and asked, what happened? It turned out that my father-in-law's current child was ill and needed a kidney transplant, and he wasn't a match. Mandy's child had matching genes, which is why my father-in-law had taken her to his villa. At first Mandy still felt she had status because of her child, but as events unfolded they gradually slipped out of her control. Her child kept showing up with inexplicable injuries, and they would encounter falling debris while walking. It wasn't until Mandy learned that her father-in-law's child needed a kidney transplant that she understood the strangeness of recent events. She had intended to take the child and leave, but her father-in-law noticed. He had bodyguards intercept the child and literally threw her out of the house. Then you shouldn't be begging me, you should go to the police. I sincerely offered her that advice. Calling the police was useless. Mandy cried. When the cops came, my father-in-law put on a very nice act and even wanted to take the child away. But my son has been spoiled by him lately, he knows life wouldn't be this good without Grandpa, so he absolutely refuses to leave. So I had no choice but to come to you. Mandy's tears and mucus flowed. Please help us. After all, Zeke is Nathan's own flesh and blood. Why should I help? He's your child with Nathan, not mine with Nathan. I put on an attitude of indifference, like it wasn't my problem. To my surprise, Mandy said, "Because Nathan loves you." Mandy told me that the person Nathan had always loved was actually me, that he wanted to divorce me, and that the disgusting things he did with Mandy were all because he had a terminal illness. "Nathan doesn't have much time left, he doesn't want to hold you back." Mandy poured out Nathan's love for me, but I didn't show much of a reaction. I knew he loved me. I also knew he was dying soon. After all, drinking every day, hanging around bars, and having to rely on medication to keep his strength up, how could he not be ill? And if he was sick and didn't take his medicine, how could he not die? I was the one who picked up Nathan's annual physical reports every year. I know his health better than he does. So? I sneered. Am I supposed to save your son? Mandy hadn't expected me to be so cold. Belatedly she said, "You don't love Nathan at all." Not at all. I hate him. Mandy was desperate, there was no one who could help her except me. She had gone to see her mother-in-law too, but her mother-in-law had recently lost the last of her money in an investment. She went to her father-in-law every day to ask for money. Now was the time to butter him up. How could she possibly offend him? "Zeke, what can we do? Mom can't save you." Mandy beat her chest in sorrow. I watched her rage for a moment, then spoke. "Mandy, do you still remember? I asked you before, why did you and Nathan break up back then?" Mandy's tears stopped. If you tell me the truth, I might consider saving your son." Mandy bit her lip, and after a few minutes, with the resolve of someone who has made up her mind, because that year, Nathan hit and killed someone. That night Nathan had taken Mandy up the mountain to watch the stars. On the way back they ran into a storm, and Nathan struck and killed someone. The woman lay on the ground covered in blood. But Nathan was terrifyingly calm. He first took Mandy home, then went to deal with the matter. Mandy thought Nathan would go to prison for this, so the next day she broke up with him and, with help from home, left the country. She did poorly abroad and came back, only to find that Nathan not only hadn't been jailed but had gotten richer, and was clinging to her again like a beggar. I listened to these words, my hands trembling, my voice startlingly low. "Do you know how he disposed of the body afterward?" I asked Nathan. "He said he paid the family a large sum and that was that." "Damn it, he farted." I hurled the cup in my hand to the floor, shards of glass scattered everywhere. Mandy stared at me in surprise, and for a moment it seemed she understood something. "Mandy, do me a favor. I'll get your son out for you, how about it?" Mandy stepped back, watching me with a sullen face, but in the end she nodded. 2 days later, Mandy went to the police and reported that Nathan had once fled the scene after an accident. The police filed the report but didn't do much at the time. After all, Nathan was already dead, and even if no one had reported it then, they wouldn't know how to investigate now. That night, however, a torrential rain fell, and a heap of white bones was washed out from the midslope of Camel Hill. After police confirmation, the bones were identified as belonging to a rural woman named Susan who had lived at the foot of Camel Hill. 8 years earlier her family had reported her missing, and these bones were only part of her remains. This was a major case, and the city formed a special investigative team. Afterwards someone went to the station and said that 8 years ago, on a rainy day, they had seen a car hit someone on Camel Hill. After striking the person the car drove off. Despite the heavy rain, they had managed to note the license plate number. The police ran the number and found that the car's owner 8 years ago was a prominent local entrepreneur, Nathan. 2 weeks later, Nathan's parents were arrested for helping their son flee the scene and for the cruel treatment of the victim. Too much time had passed, only the bodies on the mountain remained. With that, the whole truth was laid bare. 2 days later I went to the police station to collect Susan's ashes. Holding the urn, I wept uncontrollably. At that moment someone else arrived, a woman dressed all in black who sat down beside me. She reached out to touch the urn, tears falling in turn. "Mother, your daughters have avenged you." I looked at Evelyn's face, my lips trembling, and called to her, "Sister." Evelyn pulled me into her arms and stroked my back. "Everything is over. Susan was my mother. The year my father had a high fever, it was pouring rain outside, and my mother went out to find a doctor. But as soon as she stepped out, she never returned. My father, also deprived of timely treatment, died in the hospital. For a moment, it felt as if the whole sky above our home had collapsed. After burying Dad, my sister and I set out to find Mom. In the end, we heard that someone had once seen a luxury car hit my mother. When we went to ask, the person said he must have been mistaken, maybe it never happened. I knew he was afraid of getting involved. So we used some legal means, and my sister discovered the license plate number of that car. We searched and searched until it led to Nathan. From the beginning, I married Nathan to investigate the truth behind Mom's death. So I didn't care what kind of person he was, or how he was with other women. Lying low for 2 years, piecing together Nathan's mutterings in his sleep, I finally traced Mom's whereabouts. I wanted to sue him, but I had no evidence. So my sister began to approach Nathan's father. Nathan got what he deserved. Even if he hadn't drowned at sea, he would have died from illness. If the disease hadn't killed him, I would have seen to it that he ended up in prison sooner or later. In the end, Mr. and Mrs. Seong were sentenced to death, and the remaining Seong family property was inherited in full by my sister's child. That child, in the end, never found a suitable kidney donor and died in the spring of the following year. After hearing the news, Mandy, who hadn't been seen for a long time, popped back up. She carried the earlier paternity test and kept insisting her child had ties to the Seong family, demanding a portion of the estate. Unfortunately, my sister wasn't me, and fighting for the inheritance takes real power. Sister wouldn't indulge Mandy like that. She said only one sentence, and the crazy woman fell silent. "You really think it was Reginald who hurt your son back then? I heard he just settled into elementary school. What, you want to stir up trouble for him?" Mandy went pale. "This is a society governed by law now. What are you going to do about it?" "Nothing you can do, just enough to make you sick." "Bully a child, what kind of skill is that?" "All right, I'll bully you." Her sister opened her hands. "Your family isn't as well off as mine. Driving your family into bankruptcy would be a piece of cake." Mandy was now living with her parents. Upon hearing this, her face went ashen. No matter how unwilling she was, she could only obediently leave. But I hold grudges, so I got in touch with Mandy's ex-husband, who was far abroad. Mandy didn't divorce before because she cheated. Her ex had been gambling and had lost all her money. I accidentally let her ex-husband know that Mandy is currently living with her parents and that her family is fairly well off. The next day he returned to the country. I didn't hear much about what happened after that, only that both Mandy and her ex-husband were later driven out of the house. On Tomb Sweeping Day, my sister and I climbed the mountain to pay our respects to our parents. We put their graves together. It was our father's last wish. The weather that day was fine, it didn't rain. After we finished bowing, a gust of wind blew through. There was a faint, unfamiliar scent of wheat on the wind, the smell of my mother. I thought, maybe Father had brought our missing mother to come visit us.